When your children no longer respect you, how to reclaim your value and position in the family. Welcome to Practical Philosophy, where we explore profound wisdom to help you gain deeper insights into life, yourself, and the most important relationships in your journey. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on valuable content that will help you develop your mindset and build a more meaningful life. Every parent desires to be respected by their children, but the truth is, this doesn't always happen the way we expect. There is a harsh reality that many parents hesitate to face as time passes. As hair turns gray and hands lose their former strength, your role in the family also shifts. The children who once depended on you have grown up, built their own lives, and formed their own perspectives. But sometimes, their maturity comes with an unfortunate consequence: indifference, neglect, and in some cases, outright disrespect towards the very people who devoted their entire lives to them. Few things are as painful as feeling like a burden, being ignored in family conversations, or realizing that your opinions no longer hold weight. But this doesn't mean your children are inherently unkind or ungrateful. It's simply human nature. People tend to take what's always been there for granted, until one day, it's gone. However, this is not the end of your story. Respect is not something you can beg for. It must be rebuilt through the way you live, the boundaries you establish, and the way you position yourself within your family. If you've ever felt like you've lost your place in your children's lives, if you've ever questioned whether you can regain their respect, then this video will provide you with the answers. Stay with us until the end to uncover key principles that will not only help you reclaim your rightful position in your family but also rediscover your own self-worth. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Stop putting your children first. It's time to live for yourself. The ancient sages wisely said, "Too much love leads to weakness. Too much concession leads to disregard. Unconditional sacrifice does not always breed gratitude. More often than not, it leads the recipient to take it for granted." There was a mother named Eleanor, who spent her entire life devoted to her children. When she was young, she managed everything in the household. Even when her children grew up, she continued to live for them, giving all her money, time, and energy to ensure their lives were better. But as she aged, she faced a harsh reality. The very children she had sacrificed everything for no longer cared for her the way she had once cared for them. They were preoccupied with their own lives, and the sacrifices she made had become nothing more than distant memories. When Eleanor finally needed care, her children found excuses. They were too busy. They didn't have time. This wasn't because they were inherently bad children. Human nature is driven by desire, attachment, and ignorance. As children, they relied on their parents for survival and growth. But as they matured, they became entangled in the demands of society, where personal ambitions and external pressures dictated their thoughts. It was their lack of awareness of karma, gratitude, and their duty toward their parents that blinded them to their moral responsibilities. Forgetting is not always intentional. Sometimes, it is simply the result of a mind distracted by the burdens of daily life. If you constantly put your children first while neglecting yourself, one day, you may realize that you no longer have a place in their world. But this is not their fault. It is the consequence of not learning how to assert your own value. Instead of expecting your children to put you at the center of their lives, become the center of your own life. Build a meaningful existence where you are respected for who you are, not just for the role you once played as a parent. When you fully embody your worth, respect from your children will follow naturally, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Respect is not something you can beg for, nor can it be forced upon others. It arises naturally from the way you live, from the self-respect and dignity you uphold. When you live with integrity, with purpose, your children and those around you will have no choice but to acknowledge your value. The sages said, "Stand tall, and your shadow will not bend." When you remain firm in your values, you do not need to fight for respect. The world will adjust itself to honor you. Parents who are easily disregarded are not unworthy, but they often forget how to affirm themselves. They lose their autonomy. They sacrifice too much, not realizing that unconditional generosity can make children see it as an entitlement rather than a gift. You cannot control your children's thoughts or actions, but you can control yourself. You can choose how you respond, how you live, and most importantly, how you maintain your dignity. Never let others, including your own children, define your worth. Your value does not depend on their recognition, it already exists within you. Live a life that makes you proud. When you have a fulfilling existence, when you are mentally, financially, and emotionally independent, your children will no longer see you as a fragile elder in need of help, but as a person truly worthy of their respect. Thank you for being a part of Practical Philosophy. If this message resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Follow our channel to continue exploring profound wisdom that will guide you toward a more fulfilling and empowered life. 2. Don't argue. Lead with dignity to earn respect. The ancient sages said, "Words are nothing compared to actions. Debates are meaningless without real proof." When you feel that your children are treating you with less respect than you deserve, you may feel the urge to remind them of all that you have done for them. But ask yourself, has respect ever been won through arguments? Or does it only come when others recognize your worth on their own? Let's consider the story of William, a once highly respected teacher who had been admired by hundreds of students. Throughout his teaching career, he was regarded as a model of wisdom and integrity. But as he aged, things changed. His children no longer saw him as a knowledgeable mentor. Instead, they treated him as just an old man, sometimes even dismissing his words as bothersome. At first, William tried to argue. He reminded them that he had spent a lifetime shaping young minds, that his years of experience gave him wisdom beyond their own. But the more he argued, the more distant they became. His words, rather than earning their respect, only seemed to push them further away. Then one day, he had a realization. Respect cannot be demanded through words alone. He decided to change his approach. Instead of insisting that his children listen to him, he began listening to them. When they interrupted, he didn't react with frustration, he simply waited for the right moment to speak. When they dismissed his opinions, he didn't argue, he responded with calm, well-reasoned statements, delivered with quiet confidence rather than force. Gradually, his children began to see him in a new light. He was no longer just a stubborn old man clinging to his authority. Instead, they saw a man of deep experience and wisdom, someone worth listening to. It was his composure, his self-assurance, and his quiet strength that changed their perception of him. William no longer felt the need to prove himself. He simply lived by his principles, did what he believed was right, and let his actions speak louder than words. And when his children saw that others in society still respected him, they began to respect him too, not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. Respect is not something you can argue for, it is something you inspire through the way you live. 3. Don't rely on your children for emotional fulfillment, build an independent life. The ancient sages taught, when your child is young, love them with your heart. When they grow up, love them with your wisdom. This is because the human mind is not fixed, it constantly shifts according to circumstances and external influences. A child who grows up surrounded by their parents' unconditional love sees that love as a given. But when they step into the world, they become consumed by work, personal responsibilities, and relationships, often pushing family bonds to the background. Emotional dependence on children is an invisible burden. When parents place their entire happiness on their children's attention, they unknowingly impose a responsibility that their children may not be willing, or even able, to fulfill. They wait for phone calls, for visits, for small gestures of care. But when those moments don't come, they feel disappointed, saddened, and sometimes even resentful. The story of Samuel, a father who rediscovered himself. There was a man named Samuel, once the pillar of his family. In his younger years, he built a successful career, provided for his wife and children, and was a devoted father. But as he aged, he began to feel lonely, as his children became increasingly distant. At first, he constantly called them, sent messages, and tried to maintain a strong connection. But the responses became repetitive. "I'm too busy. I'll call later. Maybe next week." The messages became shorter, and the visits less frequent. Samuel felt hurt, even angry. One day, an old friend said to him, "You spent your whole life building a life for others. But have you ever truly lived for yourself?" The question struck him like a wake-up call. He realized that for years, he had neglected himself. He had once loved painting, reading, and socializing, but all those passions had been set aside. From that day forward, Samuel made a decision. He would stop waiting. He enrolled in an art class, rekindled old friendships, and engaged in activities that genuinely brought him joy. Then something remarkable happened. When he stopped seeking validation from his children, they began reaching out to him more often. They called more, visited more, not out of obligation, but because they saw that their father was living a full, meaningful life. The sages once said, "A peaceful mind creates a peaceful life." A person who can live contentedly, without depending on anyone else for emotional fulfillment, is truly free. Someone who knows how to be alone is not lonely, but rather someone who can generate happiness from within. When you stop relying on your children for your sense of worth, you will realize that your value has always existed within you. Instead of waiting for their attention, create a life so fulfilling that they feel happy to return to you. When you live with self-sufficiency, your children will respect and seek you out, not out of duty, but out of genuine love and admiration. The story of Helen, a mother who took back her life. Helen was such a mother. In her later years, she lived in constant expectation, waiting for daily phone calls, hoping for weekly visits, but as her children became consumed by their own lives, she found herself feeling lonely. Every time she called and no one answered, she felt abandoned. Then, one day, she decided that her happiness could not depend on how often her children called or visited. She joined a book club, started learning a form of art she had once loved, and reconnected with old friends. And then the unexpected happened. When she stopped waiting for her children, they began reaching out to her more often. Self-respect attracts true respect. Respect does not come from demands or arguments, it comes from how you carry yourself. When you possess an unwavering presence, when you stand firm in your own worth without seeking validation, your children cannot help but respect you. True love is not something you demand, it is something you radiate. Respect is not something you beg for, it is something you embody. Reflect on the timeless wisdom of the ancients. Take a moment to reflect on the wisdom of the ancient philosophers, who helped humanity unravel the depths of human psychology over thousands of years. Desire, anger, and ignorance are not merely individual struggles, they also shape the dynamics between parents and children. Disrespect is not always a result of heartlessness. It often stems from the natural human tendency to take the familiar for granted, to disregard what no longer challenges or serves their immediate survival. When we understand this, we no longer react with resentment or frustration, but instead, we find the path to reclaiming our value, not by seeking external validation, but by living with unwavering dignity. In the Analects, Confucius once said, "A noble person upholds virtue, while a petty person only seeks personal gain." When parents sacrifice excessively without establishing boundaries, children inevitably begin to take their efforts for granted. This is not because they are inherently ungrateful, but because human nature often prioritizes short-term benefits. Only when something is lost do people truly recognize its value. Consider the story of Charles, a devoted father who spent his entire life supporting his children financially and emotionally. As he grew older, he longed for their attention, but all he received was indifference. However, when he decided to shift his focus toward his own well-being and maintain his personal boundaries, something miraculous happened. His children began to value his presence more. This proves a fundamental truth. Respect does not stem from unconditional sacrifice, but from self-respect. Conclusion: the art of maintaining respect and living a life of dignity. Respect is not something that can be demanded, it must be inspired. It does not come from complaints or unconditional sacrifice, it comes from how you live and how you carry yourself. The ancient sages said, "When you understand your own worth, the world cannot ignore you." A person who lives by principles, who possesses inner depth and is not easily swayed by the chaos of society, will always be respected. Conversely, if you continuously seek approval, from your children or from anyone, you place yourself in a position of dependence. And in doing so, you risk losing the very respect you desire. Look at the great thinkers of the past. Confucius did not demand respect from his disciples, he commanded it through his wisdom and way of life. Laozi did not engage in debates. Yet his philosophy has endured for thousands of years. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, never sought admiration, yet his moral integrity ensured that generations continue to revere him. So ask yourself, are you living a life worthy of respect? Or are you struggling to demand it from those who no longer see your value? If the latter is true, it's time to shift your focus, not to reclaim respect from your children, but to rediscover yourself. Build a life that makes you proud. When you achieve spiritual freedom and unwavering self-respect, your children and those around you will inevitably view you in a new light. When that happens, you will no longer need to ask for respect, it will come to you naturally. Thank you for being part of Practical Philosophy. If this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Follow our channel to continue exploring life-changing wisdom that will help you live a truly fulfilling life.